Let's jump into stage one. So we're going to go through 5 stages of the book. So stage one is understanding the job hunt. So in this first part of the book, you address the job hunt stress and the different kinds of job hunt stress that exist. What are some of the kinds of job hunt stress that you've seen, and what are some tips, ideas for our listeners on how to handle that stress?
I think for international job seekers, there are more stresses than there are for a native-born job seeker. And I think it's important to recognize those and to protect your own both motivation and your mental, physical health during the process. Issues of language, issues of being in a different country and not always understanding the way the interview process is going to work, the application process is going to work, is very difficult. Also, you may have friends or a spouse or partner who isn't as tuned in to what you're going through, and they may not be as supportive. And so you may feel torn with your own emotions as you try to navigate a system that is new to you, just like your home country would be very new for me if I were to try to navigate it. So it's extremely important that you find ways to have a buddy, have a coach or mentor. It could be a friend. It could be someone that's a professional. It could be someone in the job market. And that you also find ways to take care of yourself physically, and that you take those walks, get out, you see your friends. It's just very important to balance your life. The other thing that we do know is that many of you have family and friends that are around the world in places that are very troubled. And you are on the phone, you are on WhatsApp, you are talking to them. And so in some ways you have PTSD, post-traumatic stress, every day because your loved ones are often in danger's way, are in difficult situations. And so you have to then turn that on and off to go back to your job search. So take care of yourself.
Right. And I think that stress that our loved ones feel, Betsy, is something that we're carrying. They're stressed out about our job hunts too.
That's right.
They have the stress about their own lives. They may be in wonderful conditions where they live and still have a ton of stress about what their son or daughter or
and they may have
is going through.
They may have even different expectations for you. They may think you should have job A and you should be looking for job A. Right. And with your own motivations and where you think your skills lie, or talking to someone like Stuart, you may think that career B is better for you. So you could have home pressures as well from people who have different expectations about what your career should look like.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I first went to China, this was in 1998, maybe before some of the people listening to this were even born. And the funny thing about 1998 for China, which is where I understand about 60% of international students come from, of the million that come every year, 1998 was the very first year where it was legal for college students to job hunt. So prior to that, it wasn't even allowed. And that was the 大学生工作分配制度. That was the idea that once you graduate from college, you are going to be placed somewhere. And a lot of the parents of international students today, what that means is they didn't have to conduct an initial job hunt themselves. And now they've got, at least for the case of international students, they have now family in the United States. So not only did those parents maybe not have those initial struggles, now they're talking about doing this in a different country. So the stress is going to be something that you share, which is your own stress. It's the pressure of your peers. And it doesn't really matter if you're an international student or a foreign-born national here. You're going to have all kinds of stress. So getting out, walking, right? Being with friends.
And I think also, to Stuart's point, families may not understand. They may not understand how what we talk about networking and relationship building. That's something that is not common in many of our home countries. That you have to make these relationships and have your communication skills and form so many ways of interacting beside being placed in a job or have a network that's going to help you with that job, kind of immediately pulling you into the job. You have to be much more proactive, and that's something different.
What I really took away from your book was the reminder to me too, was that we are in an entrepreneurial culture. And when I read that in your book, that helped me integrate more this message about networking and kind of why we might do it, why we might talk to people we don't know. Well, what are entrepreneurs doing? They're looking to drive interest in their business to raise money from people that most likely they don't already know.
Right.
And this country, compared to many countries, is still a young country, right? And that country has been built on this entrepreneurial spirit. So if you're coming across those trepidations, those concerns about networking and should you, shouldn't you, and the difference between your culture, your home culture, or your root culture and the United States, be aware that this whole idea of networking is quite natural in this environment, and most importantly, the willingness to take calls, right? The willingness to take those calls is actually, and receive those people for networking, is part kind of inborn in this culture. It's born, it's part of this culture. So we won't have to solve that. We won't try to solve that problem for everyone right now. But just be aware that there is that thread of entrepreneurship kind of woven throughout everything, including the job hunt. And it's something that you can adopt as your own, as a spirit in the way you search. So stress and time. I've also read in your book that there's a relationship between stress of job hunting and then the timing that we need to take for the job hunt. And you've indicated that a U.S. job hunt can take between you should allocate 6 or 12 months between that. My question here, and you can address it for the general group, but my question here is, what does that mean for how international students should time their own job hunts? Because they're coming in with, either a 4-year window or a 2-year window, or even sometimes an 11-month window to job hunt. How do we reconcile a job hunt taking 6 to 12 months when we might be in school most of that time?
Yes, I think it's a challenge as a student. On the other hand, I think that if you are aware of it earlier in your process, you will be better, because you will find more natural ways to make relationships with people that are in the job market. And those relationships, reaching out to people, forming LinkedIn connections, attending an event in your region it could be an Asian Chamber of Commerce or a Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, getting off campus. If you're thinking earlier on that it's going to take you longer, you will start those relationship building activities earlier. It doesn't mean that it's impossible if you wait and see when the jobs come, and with low unemployment, there will be jobs that are posted later and you can interview successfully. But what we do see is that those that have built those relationships earlier and are aware of it earlier, that it's going to take time, do that groundwork, and are thinking about how can they set themselves up for longer term success.
Well said. My vision for that, Betsy, is that we could be talking about a job hunt for the United States that might even start before, maybe just in that month of January or February, before, when someone gets the offer to come to the United States to attend a university. In principle, because Zoom and networking over video is so accessible, one could imagine actually starting that whole process on the day that they get admitted to a university, knowing that it's going to be another 5 or 6 months before they come to the United States.
I agree.
You could start then, right?
You could. And I think that understanding how important LinkedIn is something that, again, international students need to think about, learning how to use LinkedIn to their advantage. And through LinkedIn, you can put in the name of the university, you could put in the city, you can put in a word, engineering, accounting, and it will bring up the names of people that were graduates of that school that are in that field. You could be reaching out saying, I've been accepted. I'd like your advice. I'd like to know the 2 things that you thought were valuable about being a student there. And so you can make small requests of people, and half the time they will respond to you. Half the time they won't, but half the time they will. And so you have that ability, because of Zoom, because of LinkedIn, to form these relationships, or at least make an introduction early on and begin that process.
That reminds me, I was just up in New York City for a conference for my alumni association. And when I make these trips, I try to meet with my students, my clients, and some of them are in New York City. And I met with one of my clients, Sarah, and in her situation is we had worked together through my 12-week program, and very quickly within week 3 of the program, she had gotten an offer with a large insurance firm in New York City, and a great analytics job. And that's when the happy story ends, because she shortly got laid off, shortly after got laid off, unfortunately. So we jumped back into the job hunt together, and a couple weeks passed and she got another offer, this time for Goldman Sachs, even better. No, okay, so this sounds, on the surface like a happy, the story's going to have a happy ending, but what's going on behind the scenes is that a job hunter is facing those kinds of uncertainties, like would they connect with me or would they not connect with me? And Sarah said something that I wanted to share with all of you, which was that I'm not someone who's going to fail for the lack of trying. She's like, that's kind of who I am. So Stuart has prepared these templates and these ways to message with people to get them to network with me. He's prepared that, but just even following that advice is scary, right? Because what about the prospect of rejection?
Yeah.
And because it's real, and the rejection is because people might, all kinds of reasons, they're busy, they have stuff going on in their lives and they never connect, for example. Her point was this: I could not send these messages, not make this attempt, whatever that attempt is that's on your plate today. Maybe it's not LinkedIn, maybe it's sending a resume. I could not make that attempt and guarantee myself a 0 response, or I could make that attempt and maybe get a response, maybe at a 50% success rate. So which would you go for?
Right.
What would you choose? And you don't have to answer that right now. We don't have to answer that, but something to think about in terms of like, would I want to fail having tried, for never tried? And I can just tell you, the way that story is going to end for you is, if you are trying, you're going to succeed. It's going to happen, because you're going to be on that path. The momentum is going to build, and you are going to figure things out. So that the stress of the job hunt can often revolve around just that there's so much we can say about just that topic right there. We are still on stage 1 though, so let's keep moving here, because we got a lot of good stuff. One of the things about stress and managing the job hunt and understanding the job hunt is this question of time. And for students, a huge issue is managing time. And what I've seen is that for students, it's easy to always have a plan to graduate. I know what I'm doing here. I'm here to graduate. I'm here to get good grades and so on. But sometimes there's no plan beyond that. There's no plan to do anything beyond graduating from the program. And as a result, academics and job hunting kind of happen in sequence. So first I'm going to job hunt, or first I'm going to do my academics, and then I'm going to job hunt. The reality is that, we have this 6 to 12 month time that we need to anticipate. And the whole thing with graduating and selecting your OPT start date, and then this whole thing with the OPT grace period clock, where you can't have more than 90 days of unemployment before you have to leave the country. And navigating that whole, there's an art to navigating that. In the end, it's just a bunch of stress that we have to deal with. So you visit a lot of campuses, and just as in a role of being with the St. Louis Mosaic Project, as an author, sharing your new book. What do you see going on campuses these days as regards students and their job hunts, specifically international students?
Well, I think you have, on your LinkedIn postings and videos, you talk about that OPT clock and how to start it, how to stop it, how to manage it. But often the students and the career service offices are not in sync with each other. They're not aligned, because the career service office has been talking about it all year. But to your point, the student has thought about, I need to graduate and then I'm going to look. And so they often come to the party a little late. And then they have to figure out, what is that OPT going to be? Did I already have CPT time, OPT time? What can I do? What do these alphabets mean? And I think that that's a challenge to understand it. And I think it also comes back to having that early understanding of what your major is and whether or not it's going to give you 1 year of optional practical training or 3 years of optional practical training. And it's very exciting that under the current administration, 22 new majors have been qualified to be STEM, where you can work for 3 years for the employer, staying on your student F visa. we have to educate the employers better that you can do that. But for you to be sure as you go through your studies that you have made the right major choice is extremely important. And sometimes that decision happens too late as well.
Yeah, sometimes I've had the chance to work with students at the major declaration stage, and there was a big course correction we made because that information came to light about the STEM versus non-STEM OPT, and that has been a strategic choice for some people.
Yes.
In terms of, oh, I was going to be a finance major. Nope, no, I'm not. Nope, I'm going to be a business analytics major.
Yes.
And the passion for finance can still flourish. You might approach finance from a business analytics point of view, for example. Do you have any stories about international students and their journeys that come to mind right now in terms of just kind of understanding the job hunt or being on campus and talking with them?
Yes.
Your book specifically has some examples.
I have a number of stories in there about the students that have come. I've changed the names and the countries of the students, but I have seen the students that make these relationships with finance companies, with some of our large global companies that are used to this, have a easier path of it. Those that are trying to be hired by companies that have never had an international student have to work harder at educating the employer. I think that's what I've seen kind of between them. In terms of story-wise, one of the students at my own alma mater went looking for definitely an analytics job, and she talked to a lot of different companies and had a lot of rejections, and finally working the alumni angle really got her in the door. And I think that that's something really important, that if you're making a cold call or writing to someone that you have no relationship with, it's harder. But certainly a lot of the international students, if they can talk through their alumni online network, your own alumni network is the most interested in seeing you be successful,
right? Because
it reflects well on them as well.
Yeah, your success is their
and
success,
your success is
right?
Their success. So if you say, I'd like to have 10 minutes of your time, they will do that. Or if you say, I'd like to come in and bring you a cup of coffee or tea, they're more willing to do it. So I've seen that be one of the good stories.
Yeah, and don't spill the coffee. I've actually done the whole bring the coffee thing, but then I also spilled it all over the table. Try to avoid that if you can. So don't do that, but bring the coffee. Absolutely. What was that? Was that a Wellesley alum or a Harvard
a Wellesley
alum?
student?
Okay.
Yeah.
So cool.